Love your neighbor, buy local. That is our mantra here, and it's written in Helvetica type. I say that because we don't like serifs. Serifs, which are used on all governmental documents, just by the way. Yeah. They all have serifs, and the serif is not the shoe. You think that, well, the letter A has its little shoes on because it doesn't want to get its feet dirty as it traipses across the page. Well, no, those are really knives. And when the government writes words, the letters, maybe the letter O accepted, have serifs on them, which are knives. Why? Because government words cut. And words of novels, words of essays, words that appear, let's say, at Nooganomics.com, the website for the Man Who Matters here in Chattanooga, our chief sponsor. They are without serifs because they don't cut. They are voluntary. They propose things and enlighten, and they do not compel. They are not coercive. And so that's why I like to let you know about my font problem, okay? And that is that we propose things voluntarily, and we want in the marketplace of ideas over by the argument for local economy and the free market. That's what I do here. David Tulis, arguing for loving your neighbor and buying local. And in the details, of course, there are always the details, and they control. And we have that near is better than far, that small is better than big, and that simple generally beats complex. And down in the footnotes at 5-point type, get those readers on, because you, our listener, have one gray eyebrow here that your wife has already scolded you about. You pull that out. You've got those on 5-point type. It says personal is better than corporate, and that physical is better than abstract. David Tulis here, the blogger with the biggest pen in Chattanooga, the leading Nooga centrist, fighting for the top position with Dave Crockett on that point. And we want to talk now about a problem, about a revolution, and the revolution is part of the sexual revolution. And there's a local writer, Dave Connis. Dave Connis has, in his first published book that came out late November, is dealing with this moral and personal revolution. It's called The Temptation of Adam. And Dave, who's married with his wife Clara, they're expecting their second. They have a 2-year-old son, Asa. Dave is a writer, and his book is about Adam and his temptation. He's a 16-year-old man from the fervid imagination of this Flintstone resident, Dave Connis. Now, tell my listener what's this story about. Let's go into the narrative stream for a couple minutes, Dave. Tell us about your character.
Yeah. So The Temptation of Adam is about a 16-year-old boy named Adam, which we've already heard, and he has put all of his work into being fine, right? So that we've got this big concept of fine for this kid, and his parents have been divorced. That's happened a while back, but he's still dealing with the kind of the radiation of that. So we find him. He's pretty sad. He's pretty frustrated with his current situation, but he hasn't really told anybody about his frustration. So he's just been sitting in it. And we find him, and he gets in trouble at school. That happens in the first 10 pages. And then after that, he is forced to join what's called a transparency group. And this transparency group is just made up of other kids who all have various addictions. And he does not think he's addicted, but really he is addicted to porn.
How is he assigned to that group, and according to the story?
Yes, so he gets in trouble in school, and then one of the teachers that he is with is a family friend, and instead of getting expelled or anything like that, the family friend, the /teacher, kind of goes to bat for him and says, hey, look, I got this group that meets together. I've had really good success with this group. So how about we pull him into there instead of expelling him and just give him a chance?
Does he make an admission that this 16-year-old that he's addicted to pornography, or how is that brought into the discourse, into the quoted material in your story?
Yes, so he has, because he's been a family friend, he's kind of watched him throughout this entire progress of kind of being isolating himself from other people. He's caught him looking at porn a few times on his phone in school, and that kind of all comes out, and he is, the mentor's name is Mr. Crasher, and he is very aware that Adam is addicted to pornography, but Adam is not aware, which is typically
Adam's not aware that he is, or Adam's not aware that the teacher knows it.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what is it in the course of this story? How do you express to the reader the necessity of looking at pornographic videos and pictures? How do you convey? How do you sort of seduce the reader into that perspective? Because you really have to be a good novelist. You have to make the the reader feel the necessity of the compulsion.
Yeah, seduce is a funny word to use for pornography. No, so the thing with young adult novels is, in the teenage years, you've got such dramatic emotions that aren't filtered. You feel things really, really intensely. So when I set out to write, one of the reasons why I wanted to write young adult was because of this like super integration of feelings that aren't necessarily filtered. So when you meet Adam, you just get hit immediately with raw emotion. You get hit with his backstory. You get hit with a lot of what he's wrestling with in his head. So it's really easy to, well, hopefully it's easy. I think it's easy, but it's really easy to kind of come into his life, get right on alongside of him, and feel all of the frustration that he's feeling and the kind of the isolation that he's feeling, and you empathize with him.
Well, in what sense, Dave Connis, does your novel have what is the norm in the book? In other words, there's a norm that the writer establishes through the course of the narrative that takes the reader's time to go through. What is the norm, and how do you show that somehow Adam, 16-year-old, is somehow deviating from it, turning against what is right. Or does the reader not get that sense?
Yeah, no, you get immediately you're hit with this. Adam is saying, I'm fine. Pornography I don't have a problem. Any sort of like denial you're hit with immediately. So you get used to this norm of him saying no, 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 and then something happens. There's a inciting incident that happens, and suddenly he is starting to question, okay, maybe I'm not fine. All this work that I've put into being fine, maybe that's all a farce. Maybe it's all something that I've actually been lying to myself about being fine. And that's kind of where the norm deviates. And he starts kind of realizing, oh, my norm actually is really bad. Well, maybe my norm is actually really incomplete. Is probably a better way to put it.
You personally have a kind of Christian background, a Christian perspective. How do you make the argument for the reader who's a young adult? How do you make an argument that contains your suggestion of what is right and your suggestion of what is wrong and to be avoided? How do you do that dramatically?
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to do when I started writing this book is it's really easy for, I think, I could talk about this for a while, but Christian entertainment and Christian things that have been made for Christians, it's really easy to make, kind of like what you were saying earlier, is make them didactic and make it kind of like
preachy.
A lecture. Yeah, very preachy. It's really easy to do that, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to portray a question, mostly less of an ideal and more of a question. I think 2016 there was a report put out by Pornhub, which is one of the biggest porn websites in, I think, probably the world, and it said that 4.6 billion hours of pornography were consumed. That's hours, not minutes, right? And then you've got the global population of the I already said it. The global population is 7.6 billion people. So more than half of the global population is consuming hours of this thing. Yeah, at least an hour.
At least an hour a year.
So whenever something like that, with Stranger Things, everybody was consuming Stranger Things, and everybody was talking about it. We're not talking about the amount of porn that is being consumed, and I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's responsible, because that's a lot. That's a lot of time being spent on
What does your novel, Temptation of Adam, show is the loss or the negative to the individual who is the as you say, the addict? How does it affect?
Yeah, so I think a big part would be isolation, and a big part would be it's kind of the thief of joy, and it's really hard to not be angry, but it's really easy to not know that you're angry when you're in isolation. So Adam has just all of this anger and all of this isolation, and he blames everybody else for his problems, not knowing that there's a big part of him that could kind of take this thing by the reins and say, you know what, even if my pain has been caused by somebody else, I can still move out of it.
I'm looking at a volume by a great Puritan writer named Thomas Watson. It's called The Great Gain of Godliness. It assumes that being godly has gain to it. And the chapters have titles such as Reasons to Fear God, Walking in the Fear of God, the fear of God in our hearts, the godly should speak of God, the godly should meditate on God's name. And that there is a positive value to godliness. Now, you're dramatic. You have your job as a novelist is not just to talk about it like a theologian does. Yeah. You have to show how do you show that this yearning could be potentially satisfied in this novel, which is a question. Could be potentially satisfied in this sort of Puritan theological argument.
Yeah, so there's a character in it, Mr. Cratcher, the mentor, who is definitely a Jesus person, and really attacks his faith with questions that he's not scared to ask himself. So throughout that, you can kind of really, if you're trained in looking for the gospel and for like the fundamentals of faith, you can kind of see him pushing them towards faith, not in a like believe this or die kind of way, but more in a like, this is what I've found has given me freedom, and this is what I hope for you.
Okay, we're going to take some flack now. This is David Tulis calling you live on the air with novelist Dave Connis here of Chattanooga. What's on your mind?
I'm going to ask a couple simple questions. Why should anyone care about this book if you're a young boy and you really think that his Puritan ideas is going to overcome his sexual desires as a young man, especially with the internet being so open and pornography? I mean, men are wired to get excited looking at women. I mean, should we blame God for this? I mean, this is like, it's a field day for young boys.
Right.
You know, you think they can just say, oh, God, please, just take that desire away from me. He goes, okay, we'll take the desire I gave you, Adam, away from you.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like some silly questions, but I think they're pretty valid. Thanks.
Yeah, so one thing that I would say again is why should we care is going back to that argument from the report on Pornhub. You need to ask questions about that kind of consumption. It's irresponsible to not ask questions. We ask questions about everything. There are op-ed pieces on everything. So why not ask these questions about pornography consumption? And another thing too is a big part of my book we never see Adam get down on his knees and say, dear God, take this away. We never see him, they don't get saved at the end. There's no I guess I would say spiritual culmination side of this book. It's mostly just like, faith is hard, right? Faith is hard. Life is hard. Being alive is hard. Existing is hard. And that, without giving away too much, a big part of this book is just saying, like, look, this is hard. Like, life is hard, and the best that we can do is just love people well and be able to ask for forgiveness.
Does your book, Dave Connis, fall into a trap? And that trap, I would suggest, would be viewing pornography consumption as an addiction, and not as a rejection of God, as a kind of theological and personal problem.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I wanted to set out to write this novel was to give it to everybody, not just a specific group of people, because I didn't want it to be a lecture, and I wanted to, I wanted it to ask questions. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a trap. I definitely would say that it's on a path for people all over the place to connect with it and to get them.
So the use of the word addiction is not to suggest that you think it's a medical problem. You would say personally in your mind as the writer that it's really a problem about one's theology. Who does one worship? What is there, an idol or is there God? But in the novel, it's presented as a sort of physical necessity, right? A chemical necessity.
Yeah. So in the novel, yeah, definitely, I would say that. I mean, there definitely is an addiction, and like a big part of that. AA shows all the time, like a big part of their 12 steps is a higher power, calling yourself to a higher power. If you don't have that higher power, there's a big thing missing. That's how I feel. But no, not everybody has that locus of foundation.
Isn't the AA theory, though, kind of anonymizing God and rejecting his personal sovereignty?
It is. Well, I don't know if it'd be rejecting his personal sovereignty. I think that changes from person to person. But they're, you know, regardless of if they reject it or not, there's still a call to a higher power.
Well, we're talking with Dave Connis. This is David Tulis. We do thank you for tuning in to our show. We're brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. Well, pornography is, according to R.J. Rushdoony in his recently re-edited book. It's called what's the name? It was called The Politics of Pornography, and it has a new name. It's Noble Savage. The argument in that treatise is that the person, the pornographer, wants people to understand the following: that you're regenerated not from above but from below. That sexuality is a solitary thing. It's self-absorption. It is in fact very me-centered. Psychocentric. It's your fulfillment is all on your own. You don't have to obtain sexual gratification in context of your beloved. That you don't have to have a beloved. You don't have to worry about her needs. Or her problems, or her bad day. You don't have to worry about any of those things. It's all about you. And he suggests that following Marquis de Sade, that onanism, if you will, or sexual pornography, addiction to pornography, is ultimately voiding of yourself. You're not. It's non-relational. It's your exalting nature. You're returning to your primordial early man. That's the kind of thing that you, as the consumer, have. How do you show? Let's assume that that's just true for a second here. And Dave Connis, how do you present that claim, the primordial claim upon your character? How do you do that dramatically?
So the question is, how do I present this like deep desire just to have sex in man?
Sex in the void.
Sex in the void. I would say it's more presented in the case of we all have these things that we turn to feel better, right? Like that is just part of the human
Some people
experience.
eat big meals.
Yeah,
right?
Some people go like, I have a friend who whenever
obesity problem.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend who has Crohn's, and one of the things he does to feel better is go get a sack full of Crystal. You know what I mean? Like there's this like part of the human experience is just having things that make us feel better physically. And one of the big themes in this book is that everyone has something that they run to. And I would say that is an even bigger picture of this idea of the prime, more like this like ravaged desire, like the savage desire for sex. I would say is just this like this incompleteness. We all have an incompleteness. We all try to fill that incompleteness with a thing. And a big part of the book is saying, hey, look, we're incomplete. But the fact that we're incomplete doesn't define our ability to love well, and it doesn't define our ability to ask for forgiveness when we don't.
Though a character like Adam, though, may have problems in relationships later. This is David Tulis calling. We're on the line with me here on the David Tulis Show, and Dave Connis, the novelist.
I'm just calling you guys to come back, okay? You're missing a point here. It's not people, I have this desire, it's about me. It's physiological. When a boy turns 12 or 13, he has trouble walking around without a tower. Come on. I mean, at biblical times, you got married at 13 and died at 39. Now we're telling everybody, hold on till you're married when you get out of college. It's nice if you have a wife to go home to and you can take care of your desires, but we're not getting married at 12 and 13 anymore. It's a physiological, animalistic desire to reproduce at puberty. You can't just say, turn it off, or society is going to say, wait till you get married, then people need to start getting married at puberty. I mean, it's not that simplistic that we can just turn it off. Once again,
you're making the argument for early marriage. It sounds like.
Yeah, I guess I would say, not. I'm not making an argument to turn it off. I think that would be missing the entire point of the book. I think the point is it's not, you can't turn it off, right? Like, and I would also say that we're not, that there is a lot to call somebody to. As a human, we have a big potential. There's just so much that we're capable of doing. And to say that, to only look at one aspect, to only look at physical desires is missing an entire portion of what it looks like to be a good human. I would not I guess I would disagree and say that it's not that simple, and that there is a mindset and a lot of things to reflect on and a lot of things to ask questions about that would be beneficial. And I think that's what this book does.
Well, God gives marriage, puts sex in marriage. He walls it off. He segregates marriage to marry people, to sex to marry people only. That's his law. That's the seventh commandment, and it's a commandment that's widely violated in part among men and women, and also but Dave Connis, author of Temptation of Adam. Thanks for joining us. Dave Connis is a novelist, lives in Flintstone, and has a new book just out called The Temptation of Adam. Look for it. And he's working on other books as well. David Tulis, thanks for joining us. We're brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website of the man who made it.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.